Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, staring at the holographic display that floated before him. The blue light from the star maps cast shadows across his weathered face as he studied the data from their latest trade mission. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The Earth Survey Corps ship Endeavour had just returned from a routine diplomatic visit to the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. Jake had been a space captain for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this before. He leaned forward and touched the display controls, rotating the three-dimensional map of the galaxy. "Amy, come take a look at this," he called to his science officer. Lieutenant Amy Foster walked over from her station. She was young, maybe 30, with bright eyes that missed nothing. As the ship's xenoarchaeologist, she had studied alien cultures for most of her adult life. She knew their languages, their customs, and their history better than most humans. "What is it, Captain?" Amy asked, looking at the swirling colors of the galactic map. Jake pointed to a section of the display. "Look at this. The Zephyrians gave us their complete navigation charts. See how detailed everything is? Trade routes, star systems, territorial boundaries. They have mapped every corner of known space." Amy nodded. The map showed incredible detail. Thousands of star systems connected by glowing lines that represented hyperspace travel routes. Different colors marked the territories of various alien species. Red for the warlike Klingari Empire, blue for the peaceful Etherian Federation, green for the mysterious Zentorian Collective. "But look at this," Jake continued, pointing to one edge of the map. "Right here at the border of human space, everything just stops. No stars, no routes, no territories. Nothing but empty black space." Amy frowned. "Maybe they just don't have data for those regions yet. Space is big, Captain. Even the Zephyrians can't map everything." Jake shook his head. "That's what I thought too, but watch this." He touched another control and the display changed. Now it showed a different map, this one with orange markers. "This is from the Valerian Navigation Guild. Completely different species, different part of the galaxy." Amy studied the new map. Like the first one, it showed incredible detail throughout most of the galaxy. And like the first one, it ended abruptly at the edge of human space. "Could be coincidence," Amy said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. "Could be," Jake agreed, "but I've been checking all morning." The display changed again, showing map after map. Each one came from a different alien civilization: the Etherians, the Klingari, the Zentorians, the Moravians, the Arcturians. 12 different species. Some of them enemies who had been fighting each other for centuries. Every single map showed the same thing. Detailed information about the entire galaxy, except for the regions beyond human space. There, they all showed nothing but empty void. "This doesn't make sense," Amy said. "Humans have only had faster-than-light travel for 200 years. These species have been exploring space for thousands of years. They should have mapped those regions long before we even left Earth." Jake nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I was thinking. And there's something else." He pulled up a data file on his personal tablet. "I ran a historical analysis. I found maps from the same species dating back 3,000 years. The pattern is exactly the same. They've never mapped beyond our current borders, even when we were still stuck on one planet." Amy sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "That's impossible. How could they know where human space would be before humans even had space travel?" "I don't know," Jake said, "but I intend to find out." Over the next few hours, Jake and Amy dove deeper into the mystery. They contacted Dr. Paul Martinez, a human linguist who worked at the Galactic Council archives on Nexus Prime. Paul had spent years studying alien languages and had access to databases that most humans never saw. "Paul, we need your help," Jake said when the communication link connected. Paul's face appeared on the main screen, his dark hair messy from long hours of research. "Jake, good to hear from you. What's going on?" Jake explained what they had discovered about the maps. Paul listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "That is strange," Paul said when Jake finished. "But you know what's even stranger? I've been working with alien languages for 8 years. And I just realized something." In all that time, I've never encountered a word or phrase that means beyond human space or past the human frontier. Amy leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean it literally doesn't exist in their languages. The Etherians have words for every direction, every distance, every possible location in space. But they have no way to describe the area beyond human territory. It's like the concept doesn't exist in their minds. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Paul, I need you to check something for me. Look through the historical records. See if you can find any references to exploration beyond our current borders. Anything at all. I'll start searching right away, Paul said. But Jake, this is starting to sound like more than just a mapping error. I know, Jake said. Keep in touch. The communication ended, leaving Jake and Amy alone with their thoughts. The captain walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. They were beautiful, but now they seemed somehow threatening. Captain, Amy said softly, what if they're not mapping those regions because they can't? What do you mean? What if something is stopping them? Something that doesn't want them to explore beyond human space? Jake was about to answer when the ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Steve Parker, called out from his station. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. It's a Valerian scout ship. They say their navigation systems have failed. Put them on screen, Jake ordered. The main display showed the interior of an alien vessel. The Valerians were tall, thin, creatures with pale blue skin and large black eyes. The one speaking appeared to be their captain, though his normal composure was replaced by obvious distress. Human ship, we request assistance, the Valerian said in accented English. Our instruments have malfunctioned. We cannot determine our location. This is Captain Morrison of the Earthship Endeavor. What's your position? The Valerian's eyes widened. We are not certain. We were conducting a routine survey mission, but our equipment began failing approximately 2 hours ago. Everything shows error messages or blank readings. Jake checked his own navigation display. The Valerian ship was clearly visible, located just inside the border of human space. But according to their own systems, they should have been able to see that. Your ship appears to be in Sector 7G, just inside human territorial space, Jake said. The Valerian captain's reaction was immediate and disturbing. His face went pale and he began speaking rapidly in his own language to his crew. Jake could see other Valerians in the background and they all looked terrified. We must leave immediately, the Valerian said, his voice shaking. We did not mean to intrude. We must return to safe space. Wait, Jake said. What's wrong? Why are you afraid? But the Valerian ship was already turning away, moving back toward the border at maximum speed. Jake watched them go, his mind racing with questions. Captain, Amy said quietly, did you see how they reacted when you told them they were in human space? They looked like they had seen a ghost. Jake nodded. Yeah, I saw it. And I'm starting to think there's something much bigger going on here than just mapping errors. He turned to face his crew. Set course for Nexus Prime. I think it's time we asked some direct questions about these blank spots on the maps. As the Endeavor turned toward the galactic capital, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple mystery. The empty regions on the alien maps weren't just blank spaces. They were warnings. But warnings about what? The answer, Jake suspected, would change everything humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Commander Lisa Hayes stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic transport ship Aurora as it approached Nexus Prime. The massive space station stretched out before them like a metal city floating in the void. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species moved in carefully organized traffic patterns around the structure. This was the heart of galactic civilization, where representatives from every known species came to discuss trade, treaties, and the future of the galaxy. Lisa had been chosen to lead this mission because of her experience with difficult negotiations. She had spent 10 years working with alien governments, learning their customs and finding ways to solve problems without starting wars. But this mission was different. She was not here to make deals or sign treaties. She was here to ask questions that might not have answers. Dr. Kevin Walsh stood beside her, watching the alien ships with professional interest. As the mission's xenopsychologist, he had studied the minds and behaviors of dozens of different species. He understood how they thought, what motivated them, and how they reacted to stress. His job was to help Lisa understand what the aliens were really thinking when they gave their answers. "Remember," Kevin said quietly, "we need to watch for more than just what they say. Look at their body language, their tone of voice, the way they interact with each other. If something is making them uncomfortable, they might not be able to tell us directly." Lisa nodded. "Any advice on how to approach this?" "Start simple. Don't jump straight into the big questions. Let them get comfortable first, then gradually work toward what we really want to know." The Aurora docked at one of the station's many ports, and Lisa's team was escorted through the busy corridors by a Nexari guide. The Nexari were the species that ran Nexus Prime, and they took great pride in their role as neutral hosts for galactic diplomacy. They were short, gray-skinned beings with large eyes and a talent for making everyone feel welcome. "The council chamber is prepared for your presentation," the guide said in perfect English. "All major species representatives are present, including the Etherian ambassador and the Zentorian high speaker." Lisa thanked the guide and reviewed her notes one last time. She had prepared a careful speech that would introduce the topic gradually, starting with routine questions about trade routes and navigation before moving to the more sensitive issues. The council chamber was enormous, with seating areas arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Representatives from 23 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their particular physical needs. The air shimmered with translation fields that converted every word into the native language of each listener. Ambassador Veltar of the Etherian Federation welcomed Lisa to the platform. The Etherians were one of the oldest spacefaring races, with a reputation for wisdom and careful diplomacy. Veltar himself was ancient by human standards, having served as an ambassador for over 2 centuries. "Commander Hayes," Veltar said, "with formal courtesy, the Galactic Council welcomes Earth's diplomatic mission. We understand you have questions about navigation and stellar cartography." "Thank you, Ambassador," Lisa replied. "We are grateful for this opportunity to discuss matters of mutual interest." She began with the routine questions, asking about standard trade routes and shipping schedules. The various representatives answered easily, sharing information freely, as they always did. Lisa could see Kevin watching the aliens carefully, noting their relaxed postures and normal speech patterns. "We have also been reviewing navigation charts from various member species," Lisa continued, "and we've noticed some interesting patterns in how different cultures map stellar regions." A few representatives shifted in their seats, but their reactions seemed normal. Lisa pressed on. "In particular, we've observed that many navigation charts show detailed information throughout most of the galaxy, but appear to have less complete data for regions beyond current human territorial boundaries." The change in the chamber was immediate and dramatic. Ambassador Veltar, who had been speaking smoothly just moments before, suddenly began stammering. His normally perfect English became broken and uncertain. The navigation charts we compile them based on standard survey data," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Lisa glanced at Kevin, who was watching the room with intense focus. Other representatives were showing similar signs of distress. The Zentorian high speaker, normally aggressive and direct, was fidgeting with his ceremonial robes. The Klingari delegate, who usually spoke loudly and confidently, had gone completely silent. "Perhaps there are historical reasons for these patterns?" Lisa asked gently. "Historical?" "Yes, historical reasons," Veltar repeated, but he didn't explain what those reasons might be. "The data from those regions was lost in the Great Purge 3 millennia ago." Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. This was the first time any human had heard of something called the Great Purge. "Could you tell us more about this Great Purge?" But Veltar seemed unable to continue. He was staring at nothing, his large eyes unfocused. Other representatives were showing similar symptoms. Some were breathing rapidly. Others were making nervous gestures with their hands or appendages. "Perhaps," said a new voice, "this topic is too complex for a general session." The speaker was Zithara, the council archivist. She was a member of the Nexari species, responsible for maintaining all historical records kept on the station. She approached the platform with careful, measured steps. "Commander Hayes, the questions you raise touch on matters that require extensive research. Perhaps we could schedule private meetings to discuss these issues in more detail." Lisa agreed, sensing that pushing further in the open session would not produce useful results. The meeting was adjourned and the various representatives filed out of the chamber quickly, many of them avoiding eye contact with the human delegation. "That was not normal behavior," Kevin said as soon as they were alone. "I've never seen an entire room of diplomats react like that to simple questions." Over the next 3 days, Lisa and her team attempted to schedule the private meetings that Zithara had suggested. But every attempt was met with delays, complications, and excuses. Requests for historical records were misfiled or marked as culturally sensitive. Appointments were canceled at the last minute due to scheduling conflicts. Tony Baker, the mission security chief, discovered that their communications were being monitored far more closely than normal diplomatic protocol required. Their rooms were searched while they were out, though nothing was taken, and the searches were done with professional skill. "Someone doesn't want us asking these questions," Tony reported. "They're watching everything we do, everyone we talk to." The breakthrough came on their 4th day at the station. Lisa was walking through one of the quieter commercial districts when an elderly Kryptonian approached her. Kryptonians were known for their love of knowledge and their willingness to challenge authority when they believed truth was at stake. "Commander Hayes," the Kryptonian said in a low voice, "I am Mordain, formerly of the Academy of Sciences. I have heard about your inquiries." Lisa looked around carefully before responding. "Dr. Mordain, I know your reputation. You're a respected scholar." "I was until I asked too many questions myself." Mordain's expression was grim. "Walk with me, but do not appear too interested in our conversation." They strolled through the market, pretending to examine various goods while Mordain spoke. Quietly, "What you're asking about, what you call the blank regions on the maps, we have other names for it. The dark beyond, the forgotten reaches, the place where questions end." "What does that mean?" Lisa asked. "It means that asking about those regions is taboo across all galactic cultures. Has been for 3,000 years. Most beings cannot even form the thoughts necessary to ask such questions." Lisa felt a chill. But why? What happened 3,000 years ago? Mordain stopped walking and turned to face her directly. His ancient eyes were filled with a fear that seemed to go beyond personal concern, something that made every surviving species in the galaxy agree to never speak of it again, something that made us all choose ignorance over knowledge, silence over truth. What kind of something could do that? "The kind that would return if we remembered too much," Mordain said. "Commander, your people are young in the galaxy. You do not understand what you are asking about. The Council is nervous because your questions threaten something that has kept us all safe for millennia." "Safe from what?" But Mordain was already walking away. "Stop asking questions," he called back without turning around. "For everyone's sake, stop asking questions." That evening, Lisa called an emergency meeting with her team. Tony had discovered that 3 different alien intelligence services were now taking active interest in their mission. Kevin had analyzed recordings of their diplomatic session and confirmed that the aliens' reactions matched patterns associated with deep psychological trauma. "Something happened 3,000 years ago," Lisa said. "Something so terrible that it made every species in the galaxy agree to forget about it. And somehow it's connected to the regions of space beyond human territory." Dr. Paul Martinez was working late in his small office on Nexus Prime when the message arrived. The communication came through encrypted channels that most people couldn't access, and the sender's identity was hidden behind layers of digital protection. Paul almost deleted it as spam, but something made him hesitate. "Human linguist," the message read. You ask dangerous questions about old maps. I have answers, but answers cost credits. Meet me at coordinates 7742.3 if you want to know why the galaxy fears to look beyond your borders. Paul stared at the screen for a long time. He had been researching the mapping mystery for weeks now, ever since Jake Morrison first contacted him. The more he dug into alien languages and historical records, the more convinced he became that something terrible was being hidden from humanity. The coordinates in the message pointed to a location in neutral space, far from any government's territory. It was the kind of place where smugglers, pirates, and information brokers conducted their business away from official oversight. Paul knew he should report this to Earth Command, but he also knew that official channels moved slowly. If someone had answers about the galactic conspiracy, those answers might disappear before human authorities could act. He made his decision and chartered a small civilian transport ship. The pilot, a gruff human named Bill Chen, asked no questions when Paul paid double the normal rate for a trip to the middle of nowhere. The coordinates led to an ancient space station that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Its hull was scarred by micrometeorite impacts, and several sections showed signs of emergency repairs made with mismatched materials. But the docking bay lights were active, and someone was definitely still living there. "This place gives me the creeps," Bill said as they approached the docking bay. "You sure you want to do this, Doc?" "I'm sure," Paul replied, though he wasn't entirely certain that was true. The being who met Paul at the airlock was unlike any alien he had encountered before. Zentorians were normally tall and elegant, with smooth skin and graceful movements. This one was scarred and rough-looking, with cybernetic implants replacing parts of his natural body. His clothes were practical rather than decorative, and he carried weapons openly. "I am Kextha," the alien said in accented English. "You are the human who asks about forbidden knowledge." "I'm Dr. Martinez. You said you had answers about the maps." Kextha made a sound that might have been laughter. "I have more than answers. Human. I have proof. But first we discuss payment." The negotiation took 30 minutes. Kextha wanted enough credits to buy a new ship and disappear to some distant part of the galaxy. Paul agreed, transferring the funds from his personal research account. "Now," Kextha said, "follow me. But know this. Once you see what I'm about to show you, you cannot unknow it. Your species may not survive the knowledge." They traveled deeper into the station, through corridors that showed signs of hasty repairs and emergency modifications. Paul noticed that many of the original markings had been deliberately removed or covered over, as if someone had tried to erase the station's history. "This place used to be a Forerunner research facility," Kextha explained as they walked. "The Forerunners were the most advanced species in the galaxy, long before your kind evolved. They studied space and time itself, mapping regions that others could not even imagine." "What happened to them?" "The same thing that happened to dozens of other species. They asked the wrong questions and looked in the wrong directions. They reached a heavily secured door that required both biometric identification and complex mathematical passwords to open. Beyond it lay a vast chamber filled with data storage devices, star charts, and scientific equipment that Paul couldn't begin to identify. "This is the Forbidden Archive," Kextha said. "The Forerunners hid their most dangerous discoveries here before they died. I found it by accident 20 years ago, while running from Zentorian authorities." The star charts that filled the chamber were unlike anything Paul had ever seen. They showed the galaxy as it existed before the Great Purge, with thousands of star systems that no longer appeared on modern maps. The level of detail was incredible, not just the locations of stars and planets, but information about the species that lived there, their technology levels, and their cultural characteristics. "Look at this section," Kextha said, pointing to a region of space that modern maps showed as empty void. "This area used to contain 47 inhabited star systems, home to the hegemony, one of the most powerful empires in galactic history." Paul studied the charts carefully. The hegemony's territory had been vast, spanning dozens of star systems in a region that now appeared completely empty on all alien maps. "What happened to them?" They were eliminated, completely and utterly destroyed, along with every trace of their civilization. Kextha led Paul to another section of the archive, where they found data about other vanished civilizations. The Eternal. Dominion, the Starseekers, the Children of Light. Dozens of species that had once ruled vast territories but now existed only in the hidden records of the Forerunner archive. But why were they destroyed? Paul asked. What did they do wrong? They shared certain characteristics, Kextha replied, activating a holographic display. Look at the psychological profiles the Forerunners compiled. The display showed detailed analysis of the vanished species' mental and cultural traits. Paul read through the data with growing unease. Every destroyed civilization had shown similar patterns: enhanced pattern recognition abilities, advanced spatial reasoning skills, aggressive territorial expansion tendencies, and most disturbing of all, a drive to explore and colonize new regions regardless of opposition. These traits, Paul said slowly, they're very similar to human psychological profiles. Exactly similar, Kextha corrected. Your species matches every single characteristic that marked the destroyed civilizations for elimination. Paul felt cold despite the station's warm atmosphere. Who eliminated them? Who had the power to destroy entire civilizations? Kextha moved to a final section of the archive, where the most heavily encrypted files were stored. It took him several minutes to open the security protocols, and Paul could see that even the hardened alien was nervous about accessing this particular information. The Forerunners called them the Watchers in the Dark, Kextha said. Beings of immense power who exist in the deep spaces between galaxies. They are older than any known civilization, and they view the galaxy as their territory. The files that opened showed astronomical data that made no sense to Paul at first. Gravitational anomalies, energy readings that violated known physics, and images of structures that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. The Watchers made an agreement with the surviving civilizations, Kextha continued. They would allow the galaxy to continue existing, but only if certain conditions were met. No species would be allowed to expand beyond designated boundaries. No one would map or explore the regions where the destroyed civilizations once lived. And most importantly, no one would develop the psychological traits that marked a species as dangerous. But humans already have those traits, Paul said. Yes. Which is why the other species watch your borders so carefully. They are terrified that if humanity expands too far or grows too powerful, the Watchers will return to finish what they started 3,000 years ago. Paul sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the implications. So the blank spaces on the maps aren't just empty regions, they're graveyards. Graveyards guarded by entities that could destroy our entire galaxy if they chose to. Kextha began shutting down the archive systems. The galactic civilizations agreed to monitor any species that showed dangerous traits. They keep such species contained through ignorance and misdirection, hoping the Watchers will not notice them. But the Watchers must know about humanity. Already. We've been in space for 200 years. Of course they know. But as long as humans stay within their current boundaries and don't ask too many questions, the Watchers remain dormant. The other species work very hard to maintain this balance. Paul stood up, his mind racing with new understanding. That's why everyone reacted so badly when we asked about the maps. They're not just hiding information from us, they're trying to protect themselves from the consequences of our curiosity. Now you understand, Kextha said. The question is, what will your species do with this knowledge? As they prepared to leave the archive, Kextha showed Paul one final piece of evidence. A message recorded by the last surviving Forerunner scientist before his civilization was completely destroyed. The hologram showed a being similar to modern Etherians, but with obvious signs of advanced technology integrated into his body. His voice was calm despite the terror in his eyes. They come from the edge of forever, the Forerunner said. They spare only those who forget. The makers of silence reward ignorance. We tried to map their territory to understand their nature. Now our stars grow cold and our worlds turn to dust. Remember nothing. Map nothing. Ask nothing. Only in ignorance can you find safety. The message ended, leaving Paul and Kextha in silence. That was recorded on the last day of Forerunner civilization, Kextha said quietly. 3 days later, their entire species ceased to exist. Admiral Frank Davis was having his morning coffee when the emergency communication came through. The message was from Dr. Paul Martinez, and it was marked with the highest priority codes that Earth Command possessed. Frank had been expecting something like this ever since the diplomatic mission to Nexus Prime had returned with more questions than answers. Admiral, Paul's voice was tense, even through the static of the long-range transmission. We have a serious problem. I'm sending you data that will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. The files that followed Paul's message were massive. Star charts, historical records, psychological profiles, and recordings from extinct civilizations filled Frank's computer screens. As he read through the information, his coffee grew cold and his face grew pale. By the time he finished reviewing the data, Frank understood that humanity was facing a threat unlike anything in their history. He immediately called an emergency meeting of Earth's top military and scientific leaders. The meeting took place in the secure conference room deep beneath Earth Command headquarters. President Karen Stone attended by video link from Washington, along with the heads of every major space agency and military branch. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank began, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but we have proof of every word. 3,000 years ago, an alliance of ancient beings systematically destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations throughout the galaxy. The surviving species made an agreement with these entities to monitor and contain any future civilizations that showed similar dangerous traits. He activated the holographic display, showing the star charts from the Forbidden Archive. The empty regions on alien maps aren't unexplored space. They're the graveyards of entire civilizations that were eliminated for being too much like us. General Mike Roberts, head of Earth's Space Defense Forces, leaned forward. Are you saying we're being quarantined? Worse than that, Frank replied. We're being watched by every species in the galaxy, and they're all terrified that if we expand too far or grow too powerful, the Watchers will return to destroy everyone. President Stone's image flickered on the main screen. Admiral, how credible is this information? It sounds like science fiction. Ma'am, I wish it were fiction, but we're already seeing evidence that supports these claims. Frank switched to a new display showing real-time sensor data. Intelligence Officer Rachel Green has been monitoring alien fleet movements for the past week. Show them what you found, Rachel. Rachel stepped forward, her face grim. 3 days ago, we detected massive mobilizations by at least 8 different alien governments. Klingari battle fleets, Etherian deep space monitors, Zentorian stealth ships, and others. They're all moving toward the borders of human space. The display showed dozens of alien vessels positioned just outside human territory, forming a perfect boundary line that stretched across multiple star systems. They're not attacking, Rachel continued. They're not even entering our space. But they're all there, watching, and our communications intercepts show they're coordinating their movements despite being traditional enemies. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's chief xenobiologist, raised her hand. Have we attempted to communicate with these fleets? Ask them why they're there? We tried, Rachel replied. Their responses are cryptic, but they all say the same thing. They're maintaining what they call the watching. When pressed for details, they claim it's for the protection of all galactic civilizations. Frank switched the display again, showing intercepted alien communications. These messages are from various species governments, and they're all using similar language, terms that translate to containment protocols, ancient agreements, and preservation of the silence. President Stone looked troubled. What exactly are they trying to contain? Us, Frank said simply. According to the archive data, humanity exhibits every psychological and cultural trait that marked previous civilizations for elimination. We're curious, aggressive, territorial, and we have an unstoppable drive to explore and expand. These are exactly the characteristics that the Watchers consider dangerous. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Dr. Martinez's voice came through the speakers as his transmission continued. I managed to decode more of the Forerunner records, Paul said. The entities that destroyed those civilizations aren't just powerful. They exist partially outside our normal space-time. They can manipulate matter and energy on a galactic scale. When they eliminated the hegemony 3,000 years ago, they didn't just destroy their ships and planets. They erased entire star systems from existence. General Roberts stood up, abruptly. Then we need to prepare for war. Mobilize every ship we have, call up all reserves, and start building defenses around our key systems. General, Frank said quietly, we couldn't fight these beings any more than an ant could fight a nuclear weapon. According to the Forerunner data, the Watchers can destroy star systems by simply willing them out of existence. Then what do you suggest we do? Surrender without a fight? Before Frank could answer, another priority message arrived. This one was from Commander Lisa Hayes, still aboard the diplomatic mission ship Aurora. Admiral Davis. Lisa's voice was tight with controlled fear. We've made contact with an alien spy who was captured trying to infiltrate one of our research stations. Under interrogation, he revealed details about the galactic conspiracy that confirmed Dr. Martinez's findings. The spy, it turned out, was a Moravian intelligence agent named Zafal. The Moravians were normally peaceful traders who avoided political conflicts, but fear of the Watchers had driven them to take unprecedented actions. According to Zafal, Lisa continued, the galactic species have been monitoring humanity since we first achieved faster-than-light travel. They've been feeding us incomplete information, directing our expansion into specific regions and working to keep us contained within what they consider safe boundaries. The spy confirmed that there was indeed a species called the hegemony that was eliminated 3,000 years ago. They were humans in everything but name, curious, aggressive, expansionist, and brilliant. They discovered the existence of the Watchers and tried to make contact with them. Frank felt his blood run cold. What happened when they made contact? The Watchers interpreted their contact attempt as a threat. Within 10 years, the entire hegemony was gone. Not just their ships or their planets, but every trace that they had ever existed. The only records that survived were hidden in places like the Forbidden Archive. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Did the spy say anything about how the other species view humanity now? That's the most disturbing part, Lisa replied. They see us as a reborn version of the hegemony. They believe it's only a matter of time before we follow the same path, expanding aggressively, asking dangerous questions, and eventually attracting the attention of the Watchers. So they're not trying to protect us, President Stone said, slowly. They're trying to protect themselves from the consequences of our actions. Exactly. The galactic civilizations made a pact with the Watchers 3 millennia ago. In exchange for being allowed to survive, they agreed to monitor any species that showed dangerous traits and keep them contained. If they fail in this task, the Watchers will hold them responsible. General Roberts sat back down heavily. So every species in the galaxy has a reason to want us either controlled or destroyed. Not destroyed, Frank corrected. They want us contained, as long as we stay within our current boundaries and don't ask too many questions about the empty regions of space. The Watchers remain dormant. But we're already asking questions, Dr. Kim pointed out. We've discovered the truth about the maps, found the Forbidden Archive, and learned about the Watchers. Doesn't that mean we've already crossed the line? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Rachel spoke up. There's something else. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual gravitational anomalies in the regions beyond our borders. The patterns match some of the energy signatures described in the Forerunner data. Frank felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying the Watchers are already responding to our investigations? I'm saying something big is moving in the dark spaces beyond our maps, something that doesn't follow normal physics. President Stone's face was pale on the main screen. How long do we have? Unknown, ma'am, but based on the Forerunner records, when the Watchers decided to eliminate the hegemony, they didn't give any warnings. They simply acted. Frank looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leadership. Fear, determination, and resignation were all visible in their expressions. So what are our options? The president asked. We could try to convince the galactic species that we're not a threat, Dr. Kim suggested. Promise to stay within our current boundaries and stop asking questions about the forbidden regions. Or we could prepare for the worst and hope we can find some way to survive what's coming, General Roberts added grimly. Frank stared at the holographic display showing alien fleets positioned around human space like prison guards. There might be a third option. According to Dr. Martinez's research, no species has ever tried to communicate directly with the Watchers since the hegemony. Everyone has been too afraid to make contact. President Karen Stone stood before the assembled leaders of Earth in the emergency session hall of the United Nations building. Representatives from every nation sat in tense silence as she prepared to address the greatest crisis in human history. Outside the windows, the lights of New York City twinkled in the darkness, unaware that their entire species faced possible extinction. Ladies and gentlemen, President Stone began, 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected massive gravitational disturbances in the regions beyond human space. The patterns match those described in the ancient Forerunner records. The Watchers are moving. A murmur of fear rippled through the assembly. For the past week, world leaders had been briefed on the discoveries made by Admiral Davis and his team. The truth about humanity's place in the galaxy had shattered every assumption about their future among the stars. General Roberts stood at the presentation podium, his face grim. Our analysis suggests we have perhaps days, maybe weeks before these entities reach the edge of human space. We must decide how humanity will respond to this threat. Secretary of Defense Linda Walsh raised her hand. General, what are our military options? Can we mount any kind of defense? Ma'am, according to the Forerunner data, the Watchers can manipulate matter and energy on a scale we can barely comprehend. They destroyed the hegemony by literally erasing their star systems from existence. Our entire military could not scratch their defenses. The Chinese representative, Minister Chen Wei, leaned forward. Then perhaps we should consider surrender. If we agree to accept containment within our current borders, maybe they will spare us. That might have worked a month ago, Admiral Davis said from his position near the communication console. But we've already learned too much. We know about the Forbidden Archive, the destroyed civilizations, and the Galactic Conspiracy. In their view, we've already crossed the line. President Stone nodded gravely. Which brings us to the proposal that Admiral Davis and Captain Morrison have put forward. Captain, please explain your plan. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, after his discovery of the mapping conspiracy, stepped forward. He looked tired but determined as he addressed the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, every species that has encountered the Watchers has approached them from a position of fear or aggression. The hegemony tried to challenge them. The surviving civilizations agreed to serve them, but no one has ever tried to understand them. What do you mean? Asked the Brazilian representative. Think about it. These beings have been guarding the galaxy for thousands of years. They've eliminated species that showed certain traits, but they've allowed others to survive and even thrive. There must be a reason for their actions beyond simple destruction. Dr. Martinez appeared on the main screen via video link from his research station. Admiral Morrison is right. I've been analyzing the Forerunner records more deeply, and there are patterns we initially missed. The Watchers didn't destroy civilizations randomly. They targeted species that showed specific behaviors: aggressive expansion, territorial conquest, and most importantly, the attempt to spread beyond their designated regions of space. So they're cosmic prison guards, said the German representative, bitterly. Or cosmic gardeners, Martinez replied. What if they're not trying to imprison species, but to protect something? What if there's a reason why certain regions of space must remain empty? Admiral Beth Carter, commander of Earth's Deep Space Exploration Fleet, had been studying the astronomical data for hours. Dr. Martinez might be onto something. Look at the pattern of destroyed civilizations. They're not randomly distributed throughout the galaxy. They form a barrier around specific regions of space. She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from above. The locations of vanished civilizations formed a clear pattern, a protective ring around the galaxy's outer edge. What if the Watchers aren't trying to control the galaxy, Carter continued, but to protect it from something beyond? President, Stone felt a chill of understanding. You're suggesting that something even worse than the Watchers exists outside our galaxy? It would explain their behavior. They eliminate species that might break containment and spread beyond the galactic barriers. They're not conquering the galaxy, they're quarantining it. The assembly fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Admiral Morrison spoke again. This is why I believe we should try direct communication. Every other species has approached the Watchers as subjects begging for mercy or enemies preparing for war. We could approach them as potential allies who understand their purpose. General Roberts shook his head. That's an enormous gamble, Admiral. If you're wrong about their motives, you could provoke them into destroying us immediately. If we do nothing, they'll destroy us anyway, Morrison replied. At least this gives us a chance. President Stone called for a vote. The decision was not unanimous, but the majority agreed to attempt communication with the Watchers. Within hours, Earth's best linguists, mathematicians, and physicists were working on a message that could be understood by beings who existed, partially outside normal space-time. The communication team, led by Dr. Martinez, developed a protocol based on mathematical constants and universal physical laws. The message would be broadcast toward the gravitational anomalies that marked the Watchers' approach. We're transmitting a greeting that acknowledges their role as guardians, Martinez explained to the assembled leaders. We're indicating that we understand the purpose of the containment barriers and that we wish to discuss how humanity can contribute to that purpose rather than threaten it. The broadcast began at 14:30 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday that would be remembered forever in human history. The message was transmitted continuously for 6 hours before anything happened. The response came not as a radio signal or data transmission, but as a change in reality itself. Ships began appearing at the edge of human space, vessels that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their hulls shifted between different geometric configurations, and they appeared to be partially transparent, as if they were not entirely present in normal space. Admiral Carter was aboard the Command Ship Independence when the first Watcher vessel made contact. She had been chosen to lead the first contact team because of her experience with difficult negotiations and her ability to remain calm under pressure. This is Admiral Carter of the Earthship Independence, she broadcast on all frequencies. We received your response to our communication. We request permission to meet and discuss matters of mutual concern. The reply came not through their communication systems, but directly into the minds of everyone aboard the ship. The sensation was overwhelming, like having thoughts that were not their own suddenly appear in their consciousness. You are the young ones who ask forbidden questions, the voice said without words. You seek to understand what others fear to contemplate. Carter struggled to form her thoughts clearly, knowing that the entities could probably read her mind, as easily as listening to spoken words. We have learned about the destroyed civilizations and the role you play in protecting the galaxy. We want to understand why this protection is necessary. Step into the void between spaces, the voice replied. We will show you what your predecessors could not comprehend. What followed was an experience that Carter would never be able to adequately describe. The ship was transported to a region of space that existed outside normal physics, where the laws of time and matter functioned differently. Through the viewports, they could see the galaxy as the Watchers saw it, not as a collection of stars and planets, but as a single living entity surrounded by darkness. And in that darkness, things moved. Vast intelligences that existed in the spaces between galaxies, ancient beyond measure and hungry for new worlds to consume. The galaxy was not alone in the universe, and the other entities that shared the cosmic void were not friendly. Long ago, the Watchers explained, the barriers between this galaxy and the outer darkness were strong. But species like the hegemony weakened those barriers through their aggressive expansion and their attempts to explore beyond safe boundaries. Each time a civilization spreads too far or grows too powerful, they create gaps that the outer entities can exploit. Carter began to understand. You eliminate aggressive species not because you want to control the galaxy, but because their expansion threatens the containment that keeps worse things out. Correct. We are the guardians of the last refuge. When species become too dangerous, we must choose between eliminating them and watching the galaxy fall to entities that would consume every living world. But humanity doesn't have to follow that path, Carter said. We can choose to help maintain the barriers instead of weakening them. The Watchers paused, and Carter could sense that they were conferring among themselves in ways that transcended normal communication. Your species shows the same traits as those we have eliminated before, but you also show something new: the ability to understand consequences before experiencing them. The others acted from instinct and ambition. You act from knowledge and choice. Then you'll give us a chance? We offer you the same choice we offered your predecessors. Remain within your current boundaries and live in peace, knowing that your safety comes at the cost of expansion.